Hello, this is UATV. My name is Emily Keane. Today's guest requires no special representation whatsoever, but his very name that is surely known around the globe, General Ben Hodges. Sir, thank you so very much for joining and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you again for the privilege, Henry.
The privilege is all mine. Obviously, peace plan. General, do you believe the agreement will be signed?
I think right now it seems unlikely because the sides are still very far apart. And I think it's going to be hard to get to something where that gives Ukraine what it needs and that the Russians would be willing to accept. So I can't predict whether or not something will be signed because the Russians are really going to have to change a lot from their side, and that would require, I think, President Trump to put pressure on them, which he has not done so far.
Well, can you please try to name what you think are the unacceptable concessions for Ukraine? I mean, obviously, most of that plan seems to me is quite unacceptable, but maybe main three that Ukraine should not be accepting in any way, you think?
Well, first of all, I think clearly handing over terrain, acknowledging Russian sovereignty over certain ground is a non-starter. I mean, Ukraine should never, in my view, even if Russia occupies it, a formal handover of land, I think would be unacceptable. You know, for all the years of the Cold War, the United States never recognized that the Soviet Union had occupied Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, that we never formally recognized that. And I think that'd be important, that whatever land, if Russia still sits on top of any Ukrainian territory, nobody should formally recognize that. So I think that's one red line. I think anything that prevents Ukraine from being fully capable of defending itself, whether it's the size of the military, aspirations to join NATO, types of weapons, anything like that. Ukraine is a sovereign country. So I think it would be a non-starter, should be a non-starter in my view, for any restrictions on that. And then I think the war crimes, somehow amnesty for Russia. That I don't know how the world could even countenance that, because that Russians would be allowed to basically get away with murder. I don't think it would be acceptable.
Well, I couldn't agree more, but suppose the plan is agreed, say, with all sides, and Ukraine signs it. Do you really believe, General, sir, that the United States has enough leverage over Russia? I mean, to make the Kremlin abide by what they have signed, because Russians are famous for doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I have zero confidence that Russia would ever live up to any agreement unless they were forced to. And yes, the president of the United States has all the leverage he needs. The problem is that he never uses it. He has never put pressure on Russia. He's never told the Russians, get out of Ukraine. He can't even acknowledge that Russia is the aggressor. So he has enormous leverage he could use, but he hasn't done it. And so that means it's going to take comparable leverage from a united Europe to put pressure on Russia, whether that's economic or provision of weapons and ammunition or other things to Ukraine. Without that, I think most Ukrainians would be wise to be very skeptical that Russia will actually live up to any agreement that it has signed.
Right. Well, so are you telling me that any peace agreement without strong security guarantees is just a pause before another war, maybe even bigger war?
I think the phrase security guarantee is not the best term to use. I mean, the only thing that comes close to a security guarantee is an alliance where you've got other countries that are by treaty obligated to come to your aid. So anything other than that, we've already seen that the United States, UK, Russia, did not live up to the Budapest Memorandum. We didn't do what we should have done in accordance with the Minsk agreements. So the best, without calling it a guarantee, the best that we can do, I think, until there's NATO membership, is to do everything possible to help Ukraine defend itself, meaning weapons, ammunition, investing in Ukraine's defense industry, continuing to put pressure on Russia, limiting its ability to export oil and gas to India and China, Turkey, Hungary. These are the kind of things that we can do to deter, because that's what we're talking about, deterrence, that Russia is deterred from attacking Ukraine again.
What is happening now in Geneva? I mean, the negotiating team in Geneva has already amended the famous, or better said, the infamous 28 points of the initial peace plan, which initially looked like Putin's wish list and capitulation plan for Ukraine. Yes. What do you think, sir, was team thought behind it? I mean, what was the motivation to go for it in the first place, and so for in such a tough conditions for Ukraine?
Yeah, I think we don't know for sure exactly, what this whole, somebody called it a hot mess over the last few days, where you had clearly a Russian document, and then there was incoherence and confusion and finger pointing inside the administration. You had senators being told one thing, then people denying that was true, and you've got non-official, non-qualified people like the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Mr. Witkoff meeting in Miami with Kirill in a Russian-owned hotel. I mean, this is bizarre. So that's going on. And then you've got probably what looks to me to be an example of the political competition between Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance. So, I mean, we just look, this was not America's finest hour in terms of diplomacy. And the president, frankly, is not helpful when he says what he says, where it always appears that he clearly supports the Russian perspective in this. I will give credit to Secretary Rubio. This morning was the first time I felt like he had finally gotten some discipline in the process, and that he was the one that was leading the conversation. And hopefully we get all these other wild cards out of there. Then maybe we can start figuring out, okay, what is the actual thing? Now, the Europeans, of course, finally came forward with their own proposals. So you've got to get U.S., Ukraine, Europe. And then once you get that whole side in agreement, then you got to get the Russians to go along with it.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be, without the president, my president, putting enormous pressure on the Russians, that'll be a challenge.
That will be a challenge for sure. But you said it once that U.S. should clearly formulate its strategic goal. Well, that means that at the moment you don't see, there is none, right?
Yeah, I don't, other than stop the killing, the U.S. has never, even under the Biden administration, clearly identified its strategic objective. What do we want the world to look like when this is all said and done? And of course, it should have been that Ukrainian sovereignty is respected, Europe is secure, Russia lives in their own borders, and China is deterred because of what they saw us do. That would be the ideal end state, and that Ukraine is able to get on with continuing to grow and modernize and move towards reach its aspiration of EU membership and NATO membership. That would be the outcome. But that's never been articulated, and I don't see that coming now.
Many Americans I know still consider terrorism to be the greatest threat to the homeland security, to their own families. And to be honest, well, if Russian terror is not punished, and this is what we see, not at the moment at least, but even rewarded in a way with impunity, If Russia can get away with it, what would that mean for Americans in America? If they go, you know what? Let me rephrase that. What would you say to an American who is asking you, why should Ukraine be a concern for me in, I don't know, Oklahoma, Texas, or Ohio?
Yeah, well, number one, this America's economic prosperity is tied to Europe's economic prosperity. It's our biggest trading partner. So it's in our interest that Europe is stable, safe, secure, and prosperous. And that obviously includes Ukraine as a European state. And also, all the disruption of grain shipments and energy shipments from Russia and from Ukraine in the Black Sea region. All of these things are bad for America's economy. They raise prices. So there's an economic interest that we have to help end this war in a fair, just and sustainable way. That's number one why it matters to us, economic. The second reason it matters to us, of course, is because China is watching. If China is, in fact, the biggest threat that we have, as everybody's saying, or so many different administrations have claimed, then the Chinese need to see that the United States is serious about sovereignty and about working with our allies and protecting and respecting international law. They need to see that. And they need to see that we have the political will to do what needs to be done. And right now, what they're saying, of course, is that we can't even help Ukraine defeat a weakened Russia. So this is the second reason what's happening should matter to Americans that live in Ohio or Missouri or wherever. And then there is this third thing. It's intangible, but I think most Americans, when you peel it back, really do believe and take pride in honor and the reputation of the United States. And I think that even no matter what they may think about any administration, they would like to see the honor of the United States protected and respected. And I think that's why this matters also. We made a commitment and we need to live up to it.
What about Russia, sir? I mean, the Russian Federation has burned enormous amount of time, 4 years, a huge amount of people, more than US in all its wars after World War II combined, and has not even seized the Donbass Oblast as of now. Every day of this war cost the Russian Federation hundreds of millions of dollars. Some say about $1 billion a day, maybe. Well, that obviously can't go forever. But do you believe there is a point of no return for the Kremlin? And do you believe this point is somewhere near?
So I think the Kremlin or that Putin will keep doing this as long as he thinks he can win.
Right.
So he clearly does not care about casualties. He and the oligarchs are insulated from the problems of a bad economy in many ways. I mean, their personal life. So I think that they probably feel they can keep going for some time, which is why I think it was so important that Ukraine has made it a priority to target Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, to keep going after that, which reduces Russia's ability to export oil and gas to its customers, which is, of course, what pays for the war. So I think this was the right change or approach by the Ukrainian side. If they're successful there, then I think it will be difficult for Russia to keep doing this. And, China supports Russia right now because they get access to cheap oil and gas. If that becomes less and less accessible, then Russia becomes less and less important to China.
So is that fair to say that if that will be up to you, you would deliver a blow to the Russian economy? I mean, to right it where it hurts, shadow fleet, oil, logistics, to have the fastest effect.
Day after day after day after day after day. That would be my priority. Now, included in that, you still need to, you're trying to protect your own citizens. So going after the factories that produce drones, for example, or if you can identify places where missile launches are originating, you want to knock out headquarters or logistics. But the priority for me is destroying Russia's ability to continue to wage war.
And the last question for today, sir. Please help me to understand from military point of view, from strategical point of view. Say Russia seizes, captures Pokrovsk. Will it give it a strategic advantage on the front line, you think?
So, if you're a soldier fighting in and around Pokrovsk, it's miserable. I mean, it's the pounding, the fighting, the constant struggles there. But what those soldiers have done is create a situation that Russia, even if they finally do, and I'm not convinced they will, but even if they do finally completely capture Pokrovsk, whatever that means, then what? I mean, I don't think the Russians have the ability to exploit that. I mean, unlike their grandfathers, there are no big, armored regiments and with the tanks and BMPs ready to keep moving. I mean, they don't exist. So I think the ability of Russia to exploit whatever it finally achieves in Pokrovsk is not going to be strategically significant. Now, for sure, they will claim they've liberated another city. They finally have captured Pokrovsk. Okay, and so I think this is where the government of Ukraine needs to be able to explain what's going on. They need to be able to explain, why they stayed as long as they did, why it was time to pull out, whatever. But I would keep emphasizing, the purpose of a battle is to get to something else. So what is the purpose of this battle for Ukraine versus what is it for Russia?
Right.
Who got to what they needed to get to next? And I think when you look at it that way, then the Russians are going to be left with a hard-fought, destroyed city with nowhere to go.
What can I say? Amen to that. Even if they capture Pokrovsk, which I'm not sure they will, but anyway.
I'm not sure they will.
I'm not sure either. I mean, it's quite a time and there's so many people. And I would love to continue that interview, but you are tight on schedule. But thank you so very much, General.
Thanks for the privilege.
For your time and an expertise. Thank you. Hope to do it anytime you can.
Thanks
again.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.